this message in this book is a message for those of us who have started to settle in life, who have forgot we serve a God who created the whole entire world and who created us with infinite things to do and to accomplish. This is a message this morning for those of us who have settled, for those of us who have lowered our expectation of who God is and what God will do. This is a message for us this morning. This is a message for those of us who are sitting here like I did many years ago, praying for a person that I could partner with in my life. God, please send me a tall, handsome man to live with the rest of my life, God. Yes. I'm not the only one. I prayed that for years and years and years, and there came a time at the end of college, I was like, God, just send a human that believes in you. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. This is a message for those of you who have started to settle and lower their expectations of God, of what God will do. This is a message for those of us who are praying, God, let me in my work exemplify you. Let the work that I get up and do from 8 to 5 every day, let it bring glory unto you. Let it build your kingdom in the world. And now you're like, God, just give me strength to get up at 8 o'clock and go to this job that is meaningless and that I am not enjoying. God, just give me a job. This is for those of you who looked at your credit card bill this morning and it surpassed your ability to pay for it. This is a message for those of you who are like, I have no idea what I'm going to do to settle this debt. This is a message for those of you who have started to settle and you've lowered your expectation of what God will do. This is a message for those of you overcome this morning by grief, pain. This is a message for those of you who have received diagnoses this week and you forgot who it is God is and what it is God will do. This is what I want you to know. This is what I have learned this week in studying this part of the Bible. Never underestimate the power of a seed planted in faith. A prayer, God, give me a job that honors you and builds your kingdom. Don't underestimate what God will do through that seed. Don't underestimate the power of a seed planted. God, please partner me with someone who will build your kingdom. God, I received some really hard news this week. Just give me faith and courage in the midst of this. God, I have no idea how I'm going to begin to address my financial debt, but God, I plant this seed in faith. I believe that one step towards living my financial life to match you and what you have called me to do, God, please do something with it. God, my wife is suffering from mental health issues. Please, God, do something. Never underestimate the power of a seed planted in faith. Never underestimate the power of a seed planted in faith. In Genesis chapter 12, God says to a man named Abram, a man who is married to Sarah and prayed for years and years and years for a child. Prayed and prayed. The Lord said to him, I will make you into a great nation and I will bless you. I will make your name great and you will be a blessing. This is what God spoke to a man who couldn't have children. I'm going to make you the father of a nation. And he's like, oh, I'm not going to get one child. Who knows how many children I'm going to get? And so he goes and he tells Sarah, you can start to plan a room in our tent for a baby. You can paint the walls green. We don't know if it'll be a boy or a girl, so we'll go gender neutral. But if it's a boy, we're going to name him this. And if it's a girl, we're going to name her this. Leave the walls blank because I'll put some Star Wars characters up if it's a boy. And if it's a girl, we'll put some cute little pink ponies on that green wall. It'll look beautiful. And then they began to start planning their announcement about this baby, right? How are we going to tell the world about this baby? And the next month comes, nothing. The next month comes, nothing. The next month comes, nothing. Chapter 15, this was chapter 12, verse 1 and 2 that I read. Chapter 15, Bible scholars say it was at least a decade, 120 months of disappointment, y'all. At least 120 months, maybe more. And this is what he says, after this, the word of the Lord came to Abram. At least 120 months of God, fix this. God, here is the only seed I have. Do something with it. God, please do something with it. And in that moment of reading this, of going through chapters and chapters and chapters of God not giving God's promise to the people he said he would give it to, I'm like, what do we do with this? And I had to go to the words of Jesus. Because for some reason, when we are in the midst of pain and grief, we can't forget that God does fulfill promises, and he fulfilled the greatest promise in the whole world through Jesus. And Jesus tells this story. He tells this story. It's called a parable. It's a story that points us to the kingdom of God. He tells this story about a guy who went out and he sowed seeds. And some of the seeds fell on this dry and rocky ground, and they sprouted up, but they weren't very fruitful. And then he planted some other seeds on some decent sandy ground, and again, it sprouted, and it did a little better, but it still wasn't great. And then he started planting some seeds in some other places, and some of those seeds produced 30, and some 50, and some 100 times what he expected. And I got to thinking of the people in my life who planted a seed. The teacher in second grade who told me when I looked at her and said, I want to be the president of the United States when I grow up. And she was like, Erica, I don't know if that's in your future. Thank you for speaking that word of truth over me, Miss Smith. I don't know if that's in your future, but what if you're called to do something women haven't done before? And this week I was sitting on a plane and I told the guy I was a pastor, and he was like, only pastors I know are old white bald guys. You do not look like a pastor. But she planted a seed. What if you do something that women have not done before? I think of the coach when I was running track and field, and he told me, what would it look like if you poured into the lives in a few years of kids the same way I've poured into you? What if you mentored young people? And a couple weeks ago, we had 17 young folks in a growing and budding youth group. Some of the youth struggling with social anxiety. Y'all don't even know the pain that our young kids are living with anymore. And I got to sit there and I got to read the Bible to them. And I thought of that seed that someone planted in my life years ago. What if you didn't waste this moment, Erica, but you ran as hard as you could and you learned all you can, and then you figure out how to invest in the lives of children? My husband was a youth pastor in Nashville, Tennessee. And he says to his kids, download the Bible app on your brand new iPhones. Me and him just got iPhones. All these kids already had them. He says, why don't you download the Bible app? He gets a call 10 years after telling kids to download that Bible app. And the kid who we never expected to read that Bible app or download it called him and said, I want to talk to you about Jesus. I need to give my life to him. Can you talk to me about this Bible you told me to download, all the same thing, right? Can you talk to me about this Jesus? 10 years later, after planting that seed with high school boys, have y'all worked with high school boys? Do you know what it's like to plant seeds? Talk about rocky soil, right? I love you if you're a high schooler, but it's hard. And Chris said, download this app and read this Bible. And it took 10 years to get a call. 10 years. Because this is what happens. When we think or imagine what God will do, we think addition. We forget that first chapter we read in Genesis. If y'all weren't here, I'll tell you what it says. God tells the people to go forth and multiply. Multiply. Did God say add one by one by one? We think in terms of addition. If I get this one job, then it'll add this next thing, and then my life will go in this perfect linear thing. And you know what God thinks of? God thinks multiplication. God thinks multiplication. And here's the deal. We don't get to control the ground in which the seed is planted. That's not what we're called to do. We're called simply to place the seed on whatever ground it falls on. Never underestimate the power of a seed planted in faith. So I went back and I read about Abraham and Sarah, and I realized that those same seeds that Jesus was telling a story about planting, those same seeds that had been planted in my life, I realized God does stuff under the ground that we don't know what's happening. When I have planted seeds in my garden, if the squirrel doesn't eat them, it's another story. It's another story. If the squirrel doesn't eat them, then what happens under the ground is something that I don't know what's happening, and I can't control it. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it isn't happening. Just because you don't see exactly what you want doesn't mean God's not doing something to make it happen. May one seed bear good fruit. Think of the teachers in this very room who've went to school with 60 kids sitting in front of them, and they've thought, just one seed I plant, let it matter, God. Think of the coaches who've given pregame speeches and thought, just one of these players take this into the game of life. Think of the youth worker who said, just download this one app and read it once in a while. Think of the people who planted that one seed in your life. You never know. May one of these seeds bear good fruit. May one of these seeds bear good fruit. 120 months, at least 120 months, Abraham goes and he gets in his tent. He gets in his tent. And he prays to God. And he says, God, I have waited for years and years and years for you to make something happen. I'm tired of looking at my wife struggling and hurting. I'm tired of waiting for people who have longed for their partners. I'm tired of waiting for grief and health and diagnosis to go away. I am tired, God, of waiting. And he sits there and he tells God all these problems that he has. What are you saying to God in your tent right now? What expectation has God not met? May God bless one seed of faith. May God bless one seed planted in faith. So Abraham is in his tent, and God says, Abraham, get out of the tent. I would like to have been there for that. You know, how God's like, get out of the tent. Get out of that tent. And this is what he says. Abraham gets out of the tent. I hope it wasn't as hot in that tent for him as it was for me. And God takes him outside of the tent and he says, look up at the sky, Abraham, and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. Get out of your tent, complaining to God about not meeting your expectations. Get out of your tent. Look up at the sky. Count those stars if you can count them. That will be the number of your offspring. And thousands and thousands and thousands of years later, God called a crazy redhead to get in a kid's baby tent and come out and tell you, you are one of those stars. God planted a seed. Abraham planted a seed in faith, and you are one of those stars that God counted. If you don't believe me, turn in your Bibles to Galatians chapter 3, verse 20. Hold on. Can you help me, Matt? Galatians 3:29. Thank you. If you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed. I'm not going to sing that song. Some of you know it. Father Abraham. Y'all know it? Raise up and praise the Lord. That's what it says. Well, if you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed. You are a star. Somebody prayed in a tent for you millions of years ago, and you are an heir to the promises of God. You are heirs according to that promise of God. And so many of us are settling for a life that does not act like you are a star, like you are a seed that was planted in faith. If God met all your expectations when you were in this tent, then God wouldn't have an opportunity to exceed them. If God met all your expectations in the tent, God, give me this and this and this, then God would not have time to do more than you could dream or imagine. And that's what God promises. Read the Bible. That's what God promises. God took Abraham outside and said, look up. Look up. Abraham was thinking of a son, and God was thinking of you. Let me say that one more time. Abraham was thinking a son. God was thinking you. And you. And you. Our limited expectations cannot be placed on God's unlimited character. Our limited expectations cannot be placed on God's unlimited character. And you have no idea what God will do through a single seed. It's probably not going to happen immediately. But our God is working in all things. Do not grow weary, for we will reap a harvest. What is the seed? You ask me, maybe some of y'all are sitting here right now and you're like, Erica, you don't understand. I don't even have the power or the faith to plant a seed. Not even a seed, God. You know what the smallest seed in the whole world is? It's a mustard seed. It's so teeny, teeny, tiny. Like I couldn't even bring it and hold it and keep up with it this morning. It is teeny, teeny, tiny. And you know what God says God will do with the faith of a mustard seed? With somebody who says, I'm going to invest in this kid or this thing or this job, God, and I want it to honor you. The faith of a mustard seed, Jesus says, will move mountains. God, I don't have the faith to really think that my job can build a kingdom for you. Just pray that what seeds you are planting, God will do something more than you can imagine. See, I think so many times in my life, I've thought my job was to water it, protect it from the squirrels, to make sure it has the right amount of sun, to go outside and set the plant up. Like, I've thought my job was to do everything I could to make the harvest plentiful. I thought my job was to protect the seed. And God was really clear. My job is to believe that our God is true to his promises. And it's hard some days. I'm not standing up here saying this like I've got it all figured out. I'm telling you, it is hard some days. But God has asked us to only plant the seed. Quit worrying about all the rest because it robs us of the joy of the harvest. It robs us of the joy of the harvest. I'm praying for you guys right now that you know what seed it is to put before God. Will the band come on up here? I'm praying that you will take the seed that God has revealed unto you, and you'll take a moment this morning to plant that seed in faith before our God who keeps God's promises. What is that seed? What is that seed for you, and what does it look like to plant it for God? Will you pray with me? God, for those who are in the midst of waiting this morning, I pray. For those whose faith seems smaller than a mustard seed this morning, God, I pray. For those who need you to take them outside and show them the stars, God, give them a glimpse. Give them a glimpse of your promises, God. For those who are tired and weary, who have no idea what tomorrow holds, God, give them a seed and ask them to plant it in faith. And God, I pray that they will never underestimate your power in a single seed planted in faith. That you'll give us courage and hope to cling to your dream, your plan, your purpose that is bigger than us. And I pray for those in this room who do not yet know you, who haven't given their whole life unto you yet, God, use that seed, that star, God. Draw them unto you. Show them what a right relationship with you looks like, and redeem them and make them new. Let this be the morning they take that step. We love you, God, and we thank you for your promise.